Sunday.
Hi. Happy
Um,
Sunday.
we're back. Samantha's back. Yay.
Yay.
Um, last week, it was just me, and we had a chaotic voting adventure. I don't know. Did you ever go back and watch what we did, Samantha? Because it was
Last Sunday?
chaos. Yeah.
I have not seen it yet.
Yeah, we basically just went season by season and voted for our favorite episodes, and it was fun chaos.
Nice.
So
I feel like very proud that I could probably participate in that other than DS9 or TOS.
yeah, you probably
Yeah.
could. And I will say though, it did get very spoilery, so you probably
Oh,
want to hold
okay.
off
Well, no, I
until
wouldn't.
later.
Yeah. Good call. Spoiler
Yeah,
alert.
we had a lot of opinions of Deep Space Nine episodes,
Okay.
so
Yeah. I will avoid that like the plague then until I'm done.
there you go. Today we are back in our Deep Space Nine set. So we are gonna be discussing the episodes in season 2, Playing God, Profit and Loss, Blood Oath, the Maquis Part 1 and 2, and The Wire, which we did a live watch of this week. If people missed that on our
So
Twitter
much
feed.
fun.
It was so fun. And then the other thing we wanted to start is because we had so much fun doing the live party, we were thinking about making this a weekly thing. And so I'll mention what episodes we're going to be doing next week. Just for everyone's knowledge, we usually try to do 6 episodes at a time. And then in the last 5 minutes of this segment, so at 5 minutes to noon Pacific, I'll pop a poll up and people can vote for what they want to live watch. And we don't have a fixed day or time. I think it just depends on our schedules and stuff. But we'll give people plenty of notice. So the episodes for next week that we can decide which one we want to do a live watch of are Crossover, The Collaborator, Tribunal, The Jem'Hadar, and The Search, Part 1 and 2. And we'll go through all of those as we get through those. So with that, are you ready to get things going?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So first up in this set was Playing God. So we're in season 2. Also, hi everyone. I just realized that the Twitch chat isn't showing up in our thing. So I'm going to see if I can fix that really quick. If you want to take things off with the Playing God, Samantha.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go for it.
Yeah, this was a really fun episode to get to know more about like the whole Trill philosophy, Trill species, how all that works. With Arjun, the Trill man. So I didn't even realize that this whole initiation thing happens based on like a host's recommendation or like their approval of, yes, this person is going to be a good host, a good symbiont for the for the stomach worm, I think, as Quark calls it.
There you go.
The one with the worm.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
But it did make me realize why the Trill thing is still a little bit fuzzy for me every now and then. Is because the person, like the Jadzia, says they use the personal pronoun I as opposed to we. So
okay.
It made me realize that there's sort of it's a lot more subtle than a person being like, there's something in my stomach that's a separate entity. It's like they become one, but they also know that they're not one at the same time. Or like, so I actually rewatched this episode last night because it was a while ago. And that made me realize, oh, they use I instead of we. So that might be part of what makes it interesting.
That was screwing it up. Yeah. I think that's one thing that they've done a good job of, using the Trill to explore this idea of individuality. It's like, you know, that there's the symbiont and there's the memories and there's the skill sets that come with the symbiont, but then there's the planting on top of it of the individual who's the host. Yeah. And so getting to know Jadzia and what she brings to the Trill symbiont. It's interesting. Yeah.
It is. I really like them as characters, and I love getting to know Jadzia. She's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
so
fabulous. We love her. She is. And actually, I think on this rewatch, I've always liked Jadzia, but I think for whatever reason, I'm really appreciating her in this like rewatch. I think her character is fantastic. So yeah, and I have multiple Raktaginos in front of me. Yeah. So Bahana mentioned playing God isn't one of my favorites. Yeah, I think it's a contingent a little bit on how you felt about Arjun. I think Arjun could be hit or miss for a lot of people.
Honestly, this episode was more. He's very forgettable. Like this episode was more for me about like getting to know the Trill the Trill process. You know, he was just kind of a conduit to help me understand that. But I didn't. Yeah, he was very.
That's fair.
As a person, but he was a good catalyst to understand how that works.
Yeah,
because he was so whiny about not being able to do it and trying to please Jadzia and all that stuff. So.
That was actually one of my favorite moments. Before I come to that, just mentioning, DS9 fan said, like, prefer to think of it as the host downloading past memories. That's a pretty good comparison. And then Todd just mentioned kind of how it's different what they deal it in Stargate, where it's a little bit more of a combined entity as opposed to...
I think it's the whole, like, switching control thing is not, like, cut and dry.
Yeah.
In the Trill.
And I wonder, so one of my favorite scenes in this episode is when she calls him out on doing things to please her, doing things that he thinks she wants him to behave like. And I think that that's really effective when you're talking about the Trill and what they need to be able to do and achieve. And I think for me, where it kind of cemented my understanding of the Trill culture is that you really have to be secure in who you are and your individuality and to be able to make independent decisions in order to be a symbiont, in order to be a host. And I think that that's something she really got across. Is she was like, look, if you're doing this to please me or please your parents or please whatever, it's not going to work. It's just not.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's almost the kind of the argument people make about relationships. You know, you need to be secure in yourself before you can truly be a good partner.
Before you attach yourself to another human.
Right.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a really interesting thing to bring up. And hi to everyone who's popped in and said hi in the chat. It's good to have you all here. There is a bit of a B plot in this episode where weird things are happening. They have Cardassian voles, which just makes me laugh. Space rats, exactly. Every time. It's hilarious. And they basically are discovering that they have this, like, some sort of entity on Deep Space Nine that, or like a section of mass that's like increasing, and they discover that it's basically its own proto-universe that is going to expand and consume the station in Bajor. And so,
that was, we
can leave it at that.
It was this thing that like attached to the shuttle, right? And they brought it back somehow, and it's this own universe. Like, I was like, how does that happen? But we got some philosophical, responses from the team, and Kira's like, kill it now. It's like stepping on ants. Everyone else is like, no, we can't do that.
It's not the Starfleet way.
Or Kira.
I'm doubling up on my Star Trek Online backgrounds right now, by the way. I was telling Samantha that I screen capped this background from Star Trek Online at my favorite chair to sit in Quarks, because that's a thing I can do now in Star Trek Online.
Fancy.
Yeah. Awesome. So good. I'm glad it did not go unnoticed. But yeah, that little mini-verse thing, I mean, it just kind of cracks me up. It's Bahana's, that's a good thing. It's like thinking that these that CERN is creating mini black holes that are creating multiple universes. And yeah, what I thought of was the universe that lives in the collar and Men in Black. That's what I thought. But yeah, I mean, but they do get into some philosophical stuff of, do you squish the ants? Do you let them live? Do they get angrier when you poke at them and all of those sort of things? And yeah, it's interesting. But overall, though, it's a episode where we get to learn about the Trills. And I like how Jadzia, also just to kind of swing back to that individuality concept, I like how we saw that Jadzia is so secure in who she is versus who Curzon was. That she makes it very clear to him. She's like, Curzon had this reputation as a mentor. We get to hear her backstory with him and what their relationship was like when he was sort of mentoring her. And it's a really, I don't dislike this episode. I think it's just one of those solid backstory character development type things.
Yeah, I agree. It would not go in my least favorite bucket for sure.
Yeah, that's fair. And yeah, DS9 fan asked, so they snagged it from subspace, the little universe, but had to go back through the wormhole to put it back into subspace. Kind of, yeah. It's like something that latched onto the shuttle as they were going through the wormhole, so they kind of just, as in many things with Star Trek space anomalies, just undo what you did in order to make the thing happen. Just do it backwards.
Just press Control Z.
Yeah, exactly.
Couple times.
It'll all be fine. Yeah, exactly. And Daib, mentioned that this episode added more depth to the Cisco Dax relationship, which I think we got a lot of in this whole set of episodes. That I really like.
There were some nice Jadzia focused episodes in this set.
Yeah. Okay, so are you ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Awesome. So the next one is Profit and Loss. I always think that this is the other really bad Ferengi episode. When I see the title, I'm like, oh, and then it's not the one I'm thinking of. This one is not as bad as that one, which we haven't got to yet.
Okay.
So enjoy.
Good to know.
Good to know.
They get worse.
This is the one where Quark's basically ex-Cardassian girlfriend shows up and needs some help. She's involved in all this political issues, and we start to find out more about the Cardassian government. And it actually starts, I mean, we're gonna get a whole host of Garrick backstory in The Wire, but this is sort of laying that first foundation of his backstory, his relationship with Cardassia, that he comes to Cisco and is just like, hey, you gotta watch out for what's going on. Apropos of nothing, I'm just a simple tailor,
right.
But you gotta figure this out. Yeah, Tumor Boy, I don't know, that may have been the one I was thinking of. It definitely is. Well, we'll leave it at that. Yep. So yeah, I think Bahana made a good point. I think this is how a lot of people feel about this episode, that Quark is a little off character. So anyway, Samantha.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It seemed out of character. It seemed just sort of to happen so quickly. Like you had to dial up to, Quark had this love interest and he's sort of not trusting his own intuition. He's making mistakes. Like, it was very strange. And I did come to the conclusion that I think sometimes it seems like the writers are trying to roll all this Ferengi diversification of the Ferengi character into one person, into Quark. So he's like, has the responsibility of representing like what I thought at the very beginning, right? So Ferengis are all just about money and power. Like, that's it. And they're super annoying. It seems like Quark has the responsibility of dismantling that characterization within himself, which causes these kinds of episodes where it's like, come on, Quark. Really?
That's a really good point. And I think, Tumor Boy phrased it exactly how I wanted to say it, which is they do a better job of expanding on it in the future so Quark doesn't have to bear all of that. So I think that this was probably a noted misstep from the writers to try to figure out what to do to build in more character development, but then realizing that maybe Quark doesn't have to be the one that carries all that burden. Yeah, and that's an interesting point, Daib, that they tend to make Quark more inept when they want to make a co-star better or shine in an episode.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, I've noticed that a little bit.
Yeah. So before we had watched The Wire, how did this add in layers for your Garrick perspective?
Well, it was definitely one of those episodes where it was like, okay, is Garrick good or bad or somewhere in between? Like, what, like, is he ambivalent? Does he just go where the opportunities are? Does he have a heart of gold, or is he truly a spy and truly wants Cardassia to, you know, come back or whatever. So, I mean, it was interesting in that respect. And then, because he does sort of yo-yo through the episode and you're just really not sure. And I'm still, of course, I'm still not sure. Like, I think he's got that ambiguous thing going on. But at the end of this episode, he swings back to the, good side. Well,
because this is the first time because this is when Gul Turan shows up in the midst of all of this chaos and basically taunts Garrick, that he's like, oh, you're a Gul now. He says, oh, you're a Gul now. And he's basically like, look at your sad, pathetic life and what you've become. And tries to tempt him to like come back, give him that opportunity. But in a very like seedy way that Garrick makes the right choice.
Yeah, exactly. But I felt like there were moments when you could see the wheels turning, and then just that moment, like that taunting may have come back when in The Wire, when Garrick's like going through his withdrawal symptoms and like taunting Bashir basically and saying, I hate it here and I'm just a tailor and all this stuff. So I think, who knows if that, instigated that, but so I guess my thing was like, I didn't know how much of that taunting Bashir would have taken to heart. Like, does he actually feel that way, or where's he, like, is he just putting up with his situation, or is he somewhat content where he is?
Awesome. Yeah. Garrick agrees. Thanks to Astro continuing their subscription. So thank you. Yay, Garrick Jazz Hands. And Music Paladin just followed as well. So thank you for that. Yeah, and I think that I love that when you were pondering, where Garrick lies in all of this, Tumor Boy just said the answer is yes. He's all of it. Like,
I mean, that's pretty clear.
Exactly. And I think and we'll obviously, we're talking about The Wire in this set of episodes at the end, so we'll get into a lot more of that and bring up again what Dave just pointed out as well. I do want to share a really cool, fun, weird fact about this episode, though, that when I was sort of looking up stuff about it. So for those of you who are from LA or might remember this, the Northridge earthquake, the one that hit the valley with a magnitude 6.7 or something, bad, horrible earthquake in the early 90s. They were filming this episode when that earthquake hit. And that earthquake hit like first thing in the morning. It was like at 4:30 or something. And all of the prosthetic actors were in the makeup chair. So Armin Shimmerman, Andy Robinson, Garrick, all of them were started mostly through their makeup because they had a 5 a.m. call. And the earthquake hit, and it was huge. They were filming on the Paramount lots, so not far away. And they basically all ran out. It was dark, got in their cars in full makeup, and drove home. And they said it was such a surreal thing because I think it was either Armin or Andy who was making the joke about, like, I can't imagine what people must have thought with all this chaos horror that was going on, and then to see like a Ferengi running through the streets at dark, like if they'd unleashed creatures from the hell mouth into Los Angeles.
Hilarious.
But but in terms of this production, everyone was fine, and they resumed filming 2 months or not 2 months, sorry, 2 days later after the fact, once they did their structure checks and everything. But yeah, crazy story. And yeah, I have no doubt Peacedevish that, yeah, so he walked in the house. So that was Armin. Okay, great. Who told that story. But yeah, the other thing just with the prosthetic makeup. So Michael Westmore is the man who did all the prosthetics through the Star Trek era. And obviously is, was renowned for his work on Deep Space Nine. And he said that one of his favorite things was in this episode when Quark and, I didn't write down the woman's name, his Cardassian girlfriend. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When they kiss, that it was the makeup was immersive enough that you didn't think about it in that scene, you're focused on the characters. It's still weird in the sense that you're just like, is that Quark? Like that, that's not Quark. Not okay. but you're not thinking like, oh man, it's just a bunch of like plastic, pressed against each other.
That was pretty well done.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And yeah, the actors just shine through their prosthetics. That's a great way of putting it, I think. Yeah. Yeah,
and I like how it seems like there was a certain attention paid to like the way genetics work in the prosthetics, and that like the other Cardassians are not like a mold of Garrick's makeup. It's like a slightly different, and like the Ferengis are the same. Like Rom is different than Quark, but they're clearly both Ferengis. So I think, that's been noticeable to me, in that they're a species. They're not like clones of each other.
Yeah, it's not just a fixed mold that is just being slightly shaped for each individual face. It's like actual individual characters. Yeah, Mom. And Tumor Boy, yeah, to be fair, normal kissing is just meat being smashed together, and the fact that I did that as my demonstration probably shows I'm not in disagreement with that. But yeah, and Music Paladin, all of Worf's family had the same head ridges. Right, we have, but I think it is interesting that the Klingons, all of them, all the prosthetics, the hi Jedi, and that they're all very individual, and I do think that very much comes across, and particularly in Deep Space Nine, so it's very good with that. Mm-hmm. And Partner has entered the chat, and I have a feeling that was my reaction to that. Oh, anyway. Yeah, Tumor Boy. I don't know. Actually, we can talk for a couple minutes on that. So Tumor Boy asked Samantha if you've seen TNG, and you have. But do you want to just kind of give a quick rundown of how your relationship with the Ferengi has evolved since then?
Yes. I have not done a rewatch of TNG, and that was the first time I saw it, so I don't have an immediate call up for that particular episode. But I did. So the first introduction to the Ferengi was Voyager, and I was like, who are these people? I do not like them. And then again in TNG, Ferengi were also not welcome in my brain. Did not like the Ferengi. That's the summary. And then Aaron literally kept saying, like, hold on, just hold on. You are going to love the Ferengi. She's been saying that now. We've been doing this for like 5 years or something, 4 years. But since Voyager, like, you will like the Ferengi. And I was like, all right, I'll maybe. Yeah. And then, yes, Quark, I love Quark. And I do think it's been a big evolution of them incorporating these different personality traits and fleshing out what the Ferengi, who they are as people, or as individuals, and yeah, they were, I guess, more cartoonish, and so I like Ferengi now more than, and
we have so much more to come. I'm
very excited.
Yeah. We will cry. The Ferengi will make us cry. From laughter and from sadness. So yes, it's all good. Okay, so moving on to the next episode is Blood Oath. So this is where Kor, Koloth, and Kang show up and ask Curzon to go off with them and avenge the death of the son, who Curzon was the godfather for, and against the albino Klingon. And thanks, yeah, my Captain Proton shirt. I was saying I got this from Garrett Wong's table at one of the conventions that we were at. So interesting fact about this one. So Blood Oath, some people really love it, and it's I mean, you know how I feel about Klingon episodes. I get excited every time there's deep Klingon politics involved. But the fun part with this is that the actors who played Kor, Koloth, and Kang actually played those characters in the original series. So this is like a pulling them back from Curzon era, and pretty cool.
That is a deep cut.
Yeah,
awesome.
they kind of let the ball drop in terms of the appearance shifting, so we don't need to get into details with that because you haven't seen the original series yet. But I personally really like this episode, so I'm curious what your thoughts were on this.
Yeah, I really liked this episode. It was really engaging and really interesting to see Jadzia in particular having to reintegrate into the group. So this was an interesting moment where Jadzia sort of took a backseat to Curzon in a way. I mean, she's still Jadzia, but she's saying, like, I have his memories, and this is really, really important to me/him. And yeah, I thought that was a very interesting moment of, again, getting into the Trill physiology and how they think about that. And it got into a lot of philosophical discussions of, like, does Jadzia owe this to them just because Curzon did? So it's kind of like that other trial episode that where in season 1, I think.
Yeah, where Jadzia was being held trial for the actions beforehand.
Yeah, so this kind of muddies that verdict a little bit, in my opinion. But yeah, a good Klingon episode. The Klingons sometimes, if it's a Klingon-centric episode, I'm like, oh God, I gotta get ready. Honor!
Yep. I demand honor.
Honor.
Yeah.
Honor.
I love it. I think, you know, they made a good point about when they wrote this episode, they wanted it to be like a Seven Samurai, Magnificent Seven type storyline, and I feel like they got it. It's a very fast-paced, action-focused episode. And I did realize, I said this back when we started watching it, why I always picture Curzon as a Klingon for some reason, and then I got to this episode, I was like, oh, yeah, that's why. Hanging out with Klingon buddies. Yeah, exactly. And it's Kor, Kang, Koloth, and Curzon. So,
yeah,
I love it. Yeah, they had, obviously, on Discovery, we have multiple albino Klingons. We had Volk, who is albino, and then we also had Tanavik, the son, who lived at the temple. And in my brain, I want that to be Tanavik to end up being the Klingon, but that's just in my headcanon.
Headcanon.
Oh, they all unmassing friendship bracelets. That's adorable. Anyway, yes. But yeah, I think that this is just, it's not like a earth-shattering story, mind-blowing episode, but it's a good episode.
It's a really good personality episode. I think it's, you know, Jadzia ends up breaking Cisco's orders, I think, to go off and fulfill this duty, and he tried to convince her it's not your responsibility, but it meant so much to her. Like, I just thought her character in this episode was fascinating and just, again, helped me get to know the Trills a bit more. And you made a really interesting note about the Klingons' response to Jadzia.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, before I get into that, I'm just gonna get ahead of the chat to make sure that there's not a devolved conversation into the debate about the Klingons in Discovery. Fair enough. Klingons have changed all throughout. And your all of your opinions are valid, but they have, there are people who hated the Klingons in this versus the original series Klingons. So with that, hi Carlos, welcome. So yeah, the comment that I wanted to make is one that, working in the LGBTQ community, you see a scene from this episode posted frequently, that, DS9 has the people who worked on Deep Space Nine, Ira all through the crowd has said they feel like they let the LGBTQ stories down in DS9 for what society needed at the time. But there is a very poignant scene here where people, particularly trans individuals, feel seen in this episode when, one of the Klingons, is it Kor, I think, when he shows up and just says, Curzon, my old friend, and they hug, and she says, I'm Jadzia now, and so he says, Jadzia, my old friend, and that's it. That's the last conversation. There's no more like, wait, you're this, or, misnaming or anything like that, and that's just... It's a great sentiment, and I like that scene is so clear and well written that it has resonated with the community so well. So I do really, I just wanted to give that scene a shout out because it's pretty cool.
That was a great moment, and that is one of the things I like about most of the Klingons we've encountered, is they kind of have that perspective of as long as you have honor, it doesn't matter. The honor thing is still tough for me, but yeah, I mean, as long as you're a stand-up person in a way, or as long as you have their respect, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons that I love the Klingon episodes and the Klingon discussion and the Klingon sort of subculture in the fandom, is that that there's very good conversations about this stuff. I think it's really fascinating. And I mean, I agree, Carlos. I think that there's definitely a gap in the history of the Klingons all the way through to, where we are now, but that's been filled in from other parts of the canon. I just think that with Kor, Koloth, and Kang in this, that it would be interesting to see their stories a little bit more. And you're right, J.S. Snyder fan. That scene in particular was very good and poignant, but certainly Kang was just like, no, not accepted. And not all Klingons are, but that's the thing I like, is that the culture is so well fleshed out that you can have people who are just like, hey, if you demand honor, but follow our ways and can stand up for yourself and will stand by our side, you're welcome into our society. And then others are just like, no, Klingon. Gowron versus Martok, but anyway, all right. And and Kor handled that as well, which is pretty cool. So, thank you, physics. Hydrate break. Cheers. Okay, now we have to get to the Maquis, part 1 and 2. And this is interesting. So I will hand this over to Samantha, because we started watching Voyager first.
Yes, that was my very first Star Trek series
ever. And then we filled in some of the newer ones, and then we watched all of TNG, and then we watched this. So you have known of the Maquis from day one.
Yeah.
But this is like the first introduction, if you were watching Star Trek as it came out. And remember, TNG and DS9 were on top of each other. This is the very first introduction of the Maquis. And I think it's an interesting episode, personally. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this, to see the origin of the Maquis, when that was like one of the first things I had to explain to you when we started watching Star Trek.
That was one of the first major, like, what that you had to like explain. And I'm also doing my own Voyager rewatch right now, and so the Maquis are kind of fresh in my brain there also. So this was really, really cool to kind of have that full circle understanding of the origins of the Maquis, now understanding even more kind of from Voyager what they were all about. So yeah, I mean, I really, really liked. At first, I was very proud of myself. It's like, I know who those are. I know that name.
Right. One of us.
Yeah. It's like, I belong. Yeah. I did love seeing how they started. And I totally called it with Captain Hudson or whatever his name is.
Right.
Like about halfway through his introduction, I was like, he's lucky.
He's a Maquis. Yeah, for sure.
Their relationship was really funny. Like their acting was odd. I don't know, the way they were like saying the lines to each other was
interesting.
I don't know if that's a thing or not, but I was like kind of taken out of it. Like, why are they talking that way?
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, about their conversation, I'll come back to it. Just want to, before the chat disappears, Astro mentioned loving the Ro story, which you did as well, the Ro Laren story, and her relationship and going off to join the Maquis. And then everyone's pointing out, yeah, she ended up commanding the Battlestar Pegasus and Battlestar Galactica. Yeah, fair. And then they do discuss Ro Laren more in the novels. And then as well as I discovered in Star Trek Online, we have that. So question from DS9 fan, does it make Seska's betrayal more significant for you?
Yes. Yeah. It does.
Back from Voyager. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to admit, I've fast forwarded through a lot of Seska's story in my rewatch, so I'm not like super on top of it. But yeah, I understand a lot more of what that was about, you know. And yeah, nothing. I didn't. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I just think it fleshes out where I saw this, which also being a huge Voyager fan, but what I see that this contributes is a really interesting, sympathetic backstory that I think we forget a lot about when we are embedded in Voyager, and then we've, you know, had the Ro storyline, and we had all this stuff come out of the Maquis. And I think particularly with Voyager merging the Maquis and finding an understanding and having that clarity of the two, you know, of the cultures come together, I think that was something that Voyager gave us. But to go back to the origins of it is really fascinating, that I personally feel like the Maquis are more sympathetic. But being like such a hardcore Janeway fan, I'm always like, Maquis, you're making life difficult. And then seeing in this and how they discuss them, it's really fascinating. So I think it's really good.
Well, yeah, and I thought it was interesting, the point that Hudson makes of like, it's easy to, like, down here on the ground, things are not as shiny and put together as a treaty, like, between the leadership makes it. You know, people down here are people, and there's a strife, there's stuff going on.
Yeah, the quote was, I think I put it in our notes, that it's easy to be a good person in a place with no problems.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I think that they do a great job of that, for sure. Demonstrating that he's like, look, we're on the front line. I don't agree with what the Federation has done to our land. You know, it was like a political sign on the bottom line, handed over to the Cardassians as a part of a treaty. And he's like, F that, man. Like,
things are still happening, like, down here, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So you mentioned at the beginning of their relationship with Cisco and Hudson. What I like about that is I felt that, yeah, their dialogue, I can see how it can be perceived as a little bit stilted and a little bit awkward, but I also think that that's very real conversation for people who like knew each other at the beginning of their careers and then have gone off to do their own separate things, and then they're coming back together, and it's like, is this the same person? I'm not the same person I was when we were together. You're not the same. Obviously, as we learned, they're not the same people. And so it's that stilted, like, oh, we're best buddies, but also I don't know who you are anymore. And then Brad, a little while back in the chat, said, like, he felt that this episode is a significant point for Cisco and almost like a growing up maturity. I mean, he's having to deal with a lot of crap anyway, but then to kind of be confronted with a friend and, you know, he's falling into that gray area a lot more. And this is a area where that really comes to him.
Totally.
And I love this scene just personally at the end of the episode of the first part where they stun him and Calvin Hudson is basically like, we gotta go away because when that dude wakes up, he's gonna be mad.
He's gonna be mad.
and that for us, I think that changes our perspective of Cisco a little bit more too, because we've seen him a little bit more on the softer side, but this is where it's like, oh no, don't mess with him. He's like, even I know we don't mess with him. So anyway. I'm very curious to, as I'll just scan through the chat real quick, but curious on your thoughts about Dukat.
Gul Dukat?
Gul Dukat.
Gul Dukat. Oh, yeah.
Because this is where he's like, he's coming and asking for help, and then he gets kidnapped.
Right.
And
he's
staying on Deep Space Nine. Yeah, no worries.
I really liked him in this episode. I think, I wrote in my notes, like, why am I liking Dukat right now? Like, why does he seem like a cool dude? What's happening?
That's funny. That's funny.
And I wrote it down and I was like, should I mention this on Sunday or not?
You should, because I was curious. And I think for a lot of us, our opinion of Dukat is totally different from the whole series. But I do remember that in the Deep Space Nine documentary, the fan-produced documentary, they addressed the fact that, like, fans, when Deep Space Nine was airing, really liked Dukat. And then upon, like, rewatch of the series, we love Garrick. You know, that he becomes the fan-favorite Cardassian. So it's really interesting that, you know, with you watching it for the very first time, learning these characters, you're following that same pattern of like, I kind of like Dukat, and that's okay.
Well, I mean, to clarify, I liked him in this episode. There was like a couple previously that I was like, no, he's bad news bears.
Don't trust. Yep.
You know, you're right though. Because I don't have any future knowledge to depend on. I'm like, he was actually kind of like accommodating and sort of cool in this episode.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's really funny. And Ryek pointed out, kind of, it's just that moment where you learn things about your friends. But I mean, you had that self-edit. You were like, I think Aaron's gonna judge me.
Aaron and like everybody over here. Crap.
It's okay.
I'm not making any friends. Like, I love Bashir from day one, and like
but this is why it's so fascinating. Like, because I think so many of us and people in the chat, myself, we forgot what it was like to watch these the very first time, and what our opinions of there were. And I think, you know, mentioning this adds some depth to him, that he is not just, as DS9 is brilliant at doing, he's not just that difficult Cardassian. He's, at times, you can see how you would fall under his charm, and I get
precisely
that. Yeah, so I love it. Oh, thank you, Carlos. Thanks for the follow. Yeah, Todd, that's a good point. The Dukat is smarmy and manipulative. Yep. But Dukat and Cisco start to have a meeting of the minds and a mutual respect. It's like they have to work together at some point. And
well, I think that was part of the major thing, was he's not a dumb guy, you know. He's manipulative for sure, and smarmy, yes. Like I'll give you that for sure. But he also understands he understands diplomacy to a point, in a sense of, him and Cisco come to this really interesting. I think understanding's almost too strong of a word, but they do come, a meeting of the minds, I think is the right way to say it. And I like, at the end, I forget the lines now. There's some moment where Cisco's like, when they're parting ways, and he says something like, shoot, I should have written it down. But there's a moment where like Cisco gives him a line that's like, I understand who you are, and I think you understand who I am. Right. And we may not necessarily always be honest with each other, but we have had moments where we were honest with each other in this recent adventure. And right. I think we can work together if we try. So yeah. I mean, who knows if that's going to happen? Obviously, I don't no idea, but it seemed like that moment of, okay.
Yeah. I think, and Physics made the point in the chat, and I don't want to get too into it because I feel like I'm starting to tread on spoilers a little bit, but that he wants to do what he thinks will benefit Cardassia and his own career. And I think we see a lot of characters who are like that throughout Deep Space Nine, and I will leave it at that. So
that's probably a very fair assessment.
Yeah. I think, so we mostly focused a little bit more on part one, I think, with this of, talking about Ducat and then him getting kidnapped and seeing the Maquis. And then obviously the big reveal at the end is that, Hudson is sort of the de facto leader of at least this organization. But they have some interesting components in this episode as well. We get our favorite Starfleet Admiral, Nechayev. She's so difficult. Oh, she's so difficult. She's so difficult. And
all of the admirals are.
I know. And she comes in swinging for Odo, and she's basically just like, this needs to. I mean, I just got the impression that like her attitude is that this needs to be a fully Federation station, and it's the reason that this isn't a Federation station is the reason we're losing control and the Maquis are happening.
Yeah.
And it's people like Odo and Kira and all these people that are causing this to not work, and it's interesting.
Yeah, I forgot about that too. That I really didn't like that. But I think I mean, she's kind of echoing probably what Cisco deals with internally on a day-to-day basis. Is he has a really tough job to be the Federation presence there, but also having to work with who's already there and who has the history there, like Odo and Kira. And I mean, I think he's pretty effective at that.
Yeah, for sure.
But when the Federation higher-ups come in and, he probably questions his how he's handling his post there.
Right.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's kind of where they have got into in the conversation about with Cisco's story arc, I think, is where you're seeing that he's finding balance that might just sometimes be at odds with the Federation and what they need. So anyway, I don't want to run out of time without seriously talking about The Wire. So are you good to move on to The Wire? Yes.
Let's go to it.
Excellent. All right. No worries, Tumor Boy. So we did a watch party of this, and we had super hyped it for you. So my number one question is, did we overhype The Wire?
No, okay. Not at all. That was it was such a good episode. I can tell why. That's why everyone was like, "Oh, that's the one we should do live for sure."
Yeah, totally. Good. Okay, so
good.
We didn't screw it up, people. Good job.
Well done.
It lived up to its thing, and so yes, we're going to talk about the Elim versus Garrick because brilliant. I mean, in case you forgot or haven't seen this episode, this is the one where Garrick starts to have headaches at his weekly lunch date with Bashir. It is a date. And and he starts to have headaches. He starts to become very irrational. He starts, they find him wasted at Quark's, kind of ranting and raving. And then Bashir takes him to try to get him to feel better. They start investigating what's going on. They find like that he has this implant that makes him that's starting to essentially degrade and break down, and so we start. I mean, it's a Garrick episode, and it's in my top 5 of all time DS9 episodes. So would love to hear your thoughts.
Oh my god, it was so good. I mean, this really just Bashir and Garrick's relationship, like, was elevated and highlighted for me in this episode in such a great way. I love them together, and it was I love doing the live thing, and that was super fun. It was a little hard to focus on the episode completely because I was trying to be a part of the chat as well, but so like, I think some certain details may have gotten over my head just a bit. But the implant thing was like, I didn't quite follow if the implant was in all Cardassians or if it was like a military thing and he forgot to take it out. So clarity there would be helpful.
Okay, so with that, they basically, this is where you find out that he was a member of what's called the Obsidian Order, and it's essentially this like super spy organization. It's like Section 31 of the Cardassian. As part of being a member of the Obsidian Order, that's how he got that implant. Okay. So that was indicative that he used to be. So that's where it's like, where he's kind of been teasing the whole time. He's like, oh, maybe I'm a spy. Or they're like, you're definitely a spy, dude. And then they find that he has this implant. And they're like, oh, yeah, no, he was definitely a spy. Because he had that. And that's actually one of my favorite moments. I think obviously there's so many great moments. But one of the best ones is when they are putting in the, like, the sort of code that they discovered for this, what it's made out of, and then they have Quark call his Cardassian buddy contact and is like, can you look this up for us? And he puts it in and he's like, God damn you, Quark, like, what did you do to me? And he's like, this is a super secret lockdown code, they're coming for me, like, shut everything down, how dare you do this? And they were like, we did not, like, that, sorry.
Yeah,
it's so good. It's such a good, where you feel that tension of, you're like, oh, because this weird Cardassian dude starts panicking, and you're like,
he totally
this
panicked.
High stakes going on here. So so yes, this idea of the Obsidian Order is a super secret organization that it's like one of those things you don't speak of, it exists, and and now we know Garrick was at least part of that. So how did you, I always forgot too that in this episode we get the Elim Garrick relationship and conclusion in the same episode. So they talk about how he had a partner, Elim, who, had let these children go, and then Garrick was trying to decide what to do about that, and, turned him in.
I thought it was the other way around.
He covered for him. Then they say, see, we're getting Garrick's stories all mixed up together. The backwards. Then it was like, because I think he says that Elim let the kids go, then he took the blame for it.
Yeah.
And then Elim, like, turned again. Anyway, he spins this whole tale that is just his own internal struggles, because it is revealed that Elim Garrick is his name. Right.
So that was interesting. And I guess I wasn't sure why he felt he had to do that. Why he felt he had to project this act onto somebody else. You know, but I guess it just speaks to his internal turmoil of being in exile and why he's there, and that's his coping mechanism, I guess, to project it onto this other person.
I think that's a perfect read on it. I would say the same thing, that he's spun this tale in his head for his own sanity, to live with the decisions he's made. And if it helps him to isolate parts of his personality and to say that was that fault, that was this fault, and then just name them, you know, it's like name your demons type thing, that helps him keep it all straight and keep it wrapped up. So, okay. I'm gonna get our poll going to talk about our watch party for next week, but I don't want to end this conversation. So, Eddie, so I want to know if you trust Garrick, first of all, and any other thoughts on this one while I get this poll up.
Well, I definitely trust him more than Goldicott.
Smart.
I think I do. At this point, I would say yes, I trust Garrick. I do think he's still a little shady. I think there's more to learn about what he's done. But I do think he's, I don't know, I can't tell if he's interested in redemption or not. I can't tell if
that's a good question.
Just sort of like, that's what happened.
Yeah.
But I'm not seeking forgiveness.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I like that. So I put a poll up into the chat. I think it should working. Yeah, that's me typing that's because I have a loud keyboard. Sorry about that. So I was typing the poll in for there, and that should be up now so people can see it. I don't know, is this stream?
I can see it.
You got it? Okay, great. Yeah, the redemption question is very good, and I think that's something we're going to keep coming back to with Garrick, is to decide like how much he wants to be saved. I think is he satisfied with the life decisions he's made, you know, and is he okay on Deep Space Nine the way that what he's decided to do with his life? I think is a really interesting one. I like it a lot.
Yeah,
I think that's a good question. If people have there were some questions about like Garrick and Goldicott from the previous episode about their relationship. There is a great book that I would recommend. We don't have to get into detail, but it's called A Stitch in Time, and it's written by Andy Robinson, who played Garrick, and it fills in all of Garrick's backstory, his relationship with Bashir, his time in the Obsidian Order, all of it. You can find a digital copy of it. It's hard to find a physical copy because it's out of print, but I would highly recommend it, and it is very, very good. And the reason I think Garrick is such a good character is because Andy Robinson was so invested in this character that he took any episode Garrick was in, he took like an extensive diary of what Garrick was doing throughout that entire episode, whether we saw it or not, and then how that integrated in the scenes. And that diary is basically what was the foundation for that book, The Stitch in Time. So
that's awesome.
Really good. Yeah, really, really good. I love it. But anyway, yeah, so it's fascinating. I think that
it is.
I think he's a great character. But on that note, any final thoughts?
No, just Bashir and Garrick.
We ship them hard. But then O'Brien and Bashir were the bromances. It's the greatest love triangle of Deep Space Nine.
Bromance to me right now with Bashir and O'Brien. It's more like a deep friendship.
Awesome.
I don't ship them.
That works.
Not right now. I may in the future.
Excellent. So we have a winner. So we will try to organize a watch party for the Jem'Hadar episode, which I believe is the season finale of season 2. So
all right,
we'll be ending season 2 with that one. And DS9er fan came in swinging. We said come up with a ship name for Bashir and Garrick, and we've got Barrick.
Barrick.
All right. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you all again so much. So the next week we're going to be talking about the episodes Crossover, The Collaborator, Tribunal, The Jem'Hadar, and then The Search Part 1 and 2, which is the opening of season 3, I believe. So we did it. Another season. All right. Well, thank you all very much for hanging out with us, and we will see you again next week. Yep.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.